Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. This is my review for Becky, which stars Kevin James, Joel McHale, and Lulu Wilson as the title character. The movie follows a teenage girl named Becky, whose father, played by Joel McHale, takes her up to their lake house to try to get to know his girlfriend and her son, since Becky's mother and Joel McHale's wife passed away long before the events of this movie. Meanwhile, a group of convicts, led by a neo-Nazi played by Kevin James, escape from a prison truck and head to this house in search for some sort of key. And it results in Becky's father, his girlfriend, and her son being held hostage inside the lake house, and it's up to Becky to try to save them. So much like with Guns Akimbo, I had heard about this movie months before seeing it, but I only heard about it in passing as the Kevin James neo-Nazi movie. I mean, that's what you would think about when you first hear about this movie, but when you actually watch the trailer, and even watching the movie itself, you kind of get an impression that it's like the movie Hannah starring Saoirse Ronan from 2011, where it's about this young girl who ends up becoming a killer or an assassin. And I thought it could be as cool as Hannah, which I think is a pretty underrated movie from the last decade. So I rented this movie on YouTube, watched it, and I gotta say, I was actually pretty let down by it. There are some things about this movie that I actually do really like, and even admire. One is Kevin James. I've never been that big a fan of him. I never saw King of Queens, or at least in its entirety. I've seen a few episodes, and I thought it was okay. It didn't really work for me. But with Kevin James appearing in so many Adam Sandler movies after King of Queens was done, he just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So for me to see him in a movie like this, where he is not only not funny, but he's also really terrifying and effectively so, that's something that I applaud him for. Kevin James is legitimately scary in this movie, and whenever his character is on screen, there's this nervous energy that just goes throughout the entire scene, and you are scared for everyone else in that room. And when prepping for this review, I found out that this role was originally supposed to go to Simon Pegg, which I could see Simon Pegg doing a role like this, but I think it's probably more amazing that Kevin James did this, and effectively, because while Simon Pegg is no stranger to comedies at all, like Kevin James, he's done a lot of comedies where he plays it seriously, but it's supposed to be played for laughs. Like when you watch the Cornetto trilogy, and especially Hot Fuzz. Kevin James has always been more goofy, so to see him take on a role like this and make it work is something I gotta give him props for. And the rest of the cast is good as well. Joel McHale is as charismatic as he can be, and Lulu Wilson, who plays Becky, is pretty good as well, even though I am not a fan at all of the dynamic between Lulu Wilson and Joel McHale. The reason is because the father and daughter relationship in this movie is the typical and cliched, the daughter resents the father because the mother passed away some time ago. I know my friend, Adorkable Rachel, would just be rolling her eyes at the fact that we got another dead mother situation here. And at first, it just makes Becky come across as a spoiled brat who is just pouty all the time, she steals. And this is very early in the movie, to where I had to wonder, are we supposed to like this character? And then as the movie goes on, you kind of realize that you're not really supposed to like anybody, and that kind of also hurts the movie itself. Because while the main villain of the movie is a neo-Nazi, your main hero of the movie doesn't really have a lot going for her outside the fact that her mom passed away and she just hasn't gotten over it. And she's mad at her dad about it. And speaking of which, did Joel McHale's character in this movie really have to be named Jeff? Because now all I'm thinking about is Jeff Winger from Community. All those problems I mentioned with the dynamic and not really liking the characters is the problem with the script. Because while watching this movie, the script is just very lazy. It's full of cliches. I mean, the reason Kevin James and the other escaped convicts even go to this lake house is because they're looking for a key. Why is it in this specific house? The movie really doesn't give an answer to why they're looking for a key that just happens to be in this exact house. And look, like, the key is supposed to be a MacGuffin. I get that, because the key's only purpose is to move the plot along. It's a plot device. But it's gotta be a plot device that makes some sort of sense. And in this movie, like, it just doesn't make any sense why this particular key is in this exact house. And like I said before, there's no explanation at all to why the key is in this house. And then the last thing that should be the selling point in this movie is the action, which is not really all that special. And the violence is really over-exaggerated, and the movie really pulls no punches. There are some grotesque moments in this movie that I don't really want to spoil because they're just so horrific that they have to be seen to be believed. But a problem with the violence in this movie is that it comes across as very over the top and just too much. Characters in this movie are not only getting hurt or killed, but they are getting mauled. And these scenes go on forever. Which on one hand, the movie's villains are a bunch of neo-Nazis, so in that sense, who cares? But at the same time, the violence becomes so exaggerated, so gratuitous, and so freaking over the top that it's not fun to watch. And if this movie had some sort of sense of humor about itself, like Guns Akimbo, then I could probably excuse the over-the-top violence. But this is more of a serious thriller than anything else, with no real sense of humor at all, despite the fact that you have both Kevin James and Joel McHale in it. So having this movie's violence be just so over-the-top does not work to the film's advantage. So this is a big disappointment for me because there's a lot in this movie that I admire. The performances, I like the fact that the pacing of the movie is fast and there's never a point where it drags. And the fact that Kevin James could take on a very different role like this and not only make it work, but have you terrified throughout most of the movie is something that you have to applaud him for, as I mentioned beforehand. But at the same time, the action's very minimal. The gore and violence is so over the top that it's just not amusing to watch. And the script is just downright messy. So I would say watch at your own risk. If you feel like you have to see this movie, then by all means, go for it. I don't think it's a total waste of time, given that, again, there are things that you can admire about this movie. But if you were expecting a tense and stylistic action film, sort of like Hannah, or even something like The Guest, then you're going to be disappointed. Because this movie pretty much fails on a lot of other aspects. So the decision to watch this movie is entirely up to you, but if you want my 2 cents, I can't fully recommend it. And there you go, that's my review for Becky. Now I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.